Welcome back to Shat on TV, Game of Thrones edition, the unofficial podcast companion piece to the juggernaut HBO series Game of Thrones. I'm one of your hosts, Gene Lyons, and alongside me is my co-host, Big D, Dick Ebert.
Good evening.
And Roger Roper could not be with us tonight. He is traveling. This is our Instacast episode where we share our quick takes on this week's episode of Game of Thrones. This week's episode was entitled The Spoils of War. The episode title is a reference to the spoils seized following the fall of Highgarden. So let's just address the elephant in the room right now, Big D. This episode was famously leaked earlier in the week. Several people have already watched it. I think we got tweets coming in saying, like, go ahead and release the Instacast now. You don't even need to wait for the episode to come out. And I think that Game of Thrones had the last laugh, because I took a peek at the leaked version and the beautiful scenes we saw in this, the battle. This shows you why you should really wait for the full release to see it in all its glory. I mean, if it's just a gorgeous scene, and so violent, and so much of the detail was lost if you're watching a 380p version.
Yeah, we talked about how this show, it makes 4K TVs, it makes HD worth it. I was kind of stuck. Even if I'd wanted to, I couldn't have watched it. My wife and I have a vow that we will not watch the episode without the other. And she's not a native English speaker. She speaks Portuguese. Her English is perfect. But when it comes to television, and if you have any accents, it throws her off a bit. So we always have to watch with subtitles. And I took a peek, like you had mentioned, at this. The compression was terrible on it. There was no subtitles. So even if I wanted to, there wasn't an option, but I'll tell you, I'm glad I did not watch it.
For those of you who have not listened to the On the Throne Instacast, this is basically, we're recording immediately after watching the show. So all you're going to get here is quick takes and impressions about the show, some of the questions that it's bringing up, some things we learned from the episode. But Tuesday, we'll be releasing the full deep dive where we get even deeper into these topics. So if you're not satisfied with this, this is us starting the conversation. Feel free to write in, host@shatontv.com, add to the conversation, and we'll come back on Tuesday with the full deep dive where we get really into the answers to a lot of these questions.
Yeah, so we try to make the Instacast immediate thoughts, big ticket items, things that we learned, things that now questions that have been brought up that we didn't have before, what we're looking forward to, and then maybe set up the idea of tomorrow's topics and what we're going to cover when we record tomorrow. Last week, we went a little bit crazy in depth. So this week, I think we're going to say a little high level so we don't chew up all the material and we have time to research. But I got to ask you right off the bat, what did you think of the episode?
We got in a lot of tweets from people who watched it early. The King B wrote in about, how disgusted he was with the episode, gave it like an 8.5, which I thought was actually pretty high considering he said he didn't really like it that much. We had other people who said it was, the greatest episode of all time, or at least the greatest episode of the season, following on the tail of when they said the last episode was the greatest episode of the season. But for me, I still stick with Battle of the Bastards being the greatest episode. The Winds of Winter, also, a highlight in the series for me. I thought this was good, but it's not the best Game of Thrones I've seen.
We often accuse Game of Thrones fans of hyperbole. I'm often guilty of it myself, but this has to be a top 3 episode for me. It had everything that I wanted. You have the emotional reunion of Arya. You got a whole bunch of secrets revealed. They gave us answers, whether it was the cave, engravings or drawings. So we know some historical information. The cat's paw dagger, we know where it is now. And then we got that fantastic battle scene that easily rivals Battle of the Bastards. So this has to be up there in my top 3. I mean, it's negligible between, Blackwater in season 2 or Reigns of Castamere, The Red Wedding in season 3, Battle of the Bastards last season, all fantastic episodes. And where I think this one balances out on a whole, from beginning to end, all the components, I think it was the most complete episode. No matter what you watch the show for, whether it's action, emotion, the mystery, this had absolutely everything.
I feel People have complained about the show having the pace being too quick because they're trying to tie up a lot of loose ends really quickly. I feel like a lot of things were very simplified. Again, this can all be explained out and built out throughout the rest of the season, so I can't pass judgment on it. But from a personal perspective, I also felt that certain characters have incredible chemistry and others don't. So this was like the most polarizing episode for me because that chemistry between Brienne of Tarth and Arya was absolutely magnificent. I loved it. But then there were conversations, all the girl talk conversations between Missandei and Dany, or the guy talk conversations between Sir Davos and Jon. It was just a little too cutesy for me. I couldn't get into it.
Yeah, but those were brief, I thought. We didn't waste a lot of screen time. But the emotional reunion of Arya returning to Winterfell and asking for Maester Luwin and Sir Roderick, I think the flaws are minor. People are going to accuse me probably of being a fanboy, but my heart was racing through the entire episode. I can't imagine a better battle filmed on a television show.
I felt it was a little too much Last Action Hero. Now we got a giant crossbow. Now we got dragons. Now we got horses. They were like showing. It was like the show was flaunting it a little too much. Battle of the Bastards, I felt, was more contained. This was, Dothraki jumping on horseback, people getting pushed in the water. It was a little much for me. But things I did like, I loved Arya's new look. She looks believable. Her swordsmanship, her outfits, everything, it matches the character completely. And, little hints of humor I thought were nice. Davos, correcting grammar. And then, of course, that moment when Jon said, the queen is gone, and your brain just all of a sudden puts it all together. She's not going to attack King's Landing, and then you see it flashes and you've got the Lannister army out there in an open field. What better opportunity? Just
sitting back, counting their gold. But I think let's finish up with the actual battle, because we can go into that, for a couple minutes. But let's just start off high level, in this episode, things we learned.
I think for me, the biggest takeaway was what's going on with Bran. You see, he's saying cryptic things, chaos is a ladder. He's distancing himself from his Stark identity, his individual identity. He even tells Mira, he doesn't need her anymore. He's being very blunt. It's not that he's cruel. It's that he, as she says, he died in that cave. And, going along with your theory, Big D, that you revealed 2 weeks ago, that there are definite touches of Night King here. You can see that this, if you believe that he eventually becomes a Night King, this is where his departure from humanity.
Yeah, and it fills in that holes that we were complaining that his disconnected emotional performance didn't seem right. And they answer it, I think, economically, that I'm not going to question it. But the big takeaway in the Bran segments for me was he's continuing to see. He lets Arya know that he was watching her at the crossroads, and he thought she was going to head to King's Landing. He even reveals that he knows about her list. So Bran says, I see quite a lot now. It's a little unnerving. He's not just watching from afar situations. He knows about Arya's list when I don't know that she's discussed it recently, except for with Sansa. Do you think that's a bigger takeaway than maybe the reveal of where the cat's paw dagger's been?
I think so. I mean, the cat's paw dagger, we'd really kind of narrowed it down to two different places. It was either going to be in Littlefinger's possession or it was going to be among Ned's effects. So you know where it is. I don't think that was a huge. I wasn't surprised by it. People have called it out before. The big thing here is you see this. There's a dichotomy there, or an opposition there between Bran and Arya, in the sense that he is cryptic, unnerving, a little inhuman. And yet he says, like, I'm a cripple. I have no use for this dagger. Whereas you have Arya, who is a straight up killer and has a list of people she'd like to kill. And you can see that Sansa's partly amused by it, but also partly a little disturbed by it. And I think that we're seeing here that neither of them is really pure Stark anymore. And it's evidence of the show showing character development, showing change among these characters. And they are really two of the more interesting characters in this season.
Yeah, he makes it clear that he is no longer Brandon Stark. I'm not Lord Stark. Mira says to him, she says, you actually died in that cave. The fact that Hodor died for him, that Summer died for him, that her brother died for him, doesn't affect him. I was shocked that Mira just walks out, that it was that cut and dry. And if she believes that Brandon is dead, as a show watcher, I have to believe it also. That there's very little of Brandon left in there.
Yeah, and I think that another thing we need to keep an eye on is with Arya. It's very easy to fall into the trap of falling in love with this girl who is a killer. We see her really developing, but it is the sort of issue that she likes the secrets. Like when she blatantly tells Sansa that she has a list of people she wants to kill, and Sansa kind of laughs about it, and then she laughs about it too. It's like she enjoys having these secrets. And she also loves flaunting the truth. And I wonder if that is a character trait that, if you take it to the extreme, like any other character trait, it goes from amusing to endearing to it could be potentially terrifying.
I thought their conversation seemed genuine and realistic. That she asked, "How did you get here?" And she says it was a long, painful journey. And Sansa says, "Yeah, mine too." They don't need to rehash it. It's not as important. But Sansa makes the comment that our story is not over. And that's the big takeaway for me, is that they still have a lot to contribute. And talk about contributing. Every season before, we've been led to believe that Arya is this killer through all of her training. But it never jived. It never really gelled for me that she was a legitimate threat. But her performance, the way she stands, her stature, her confidence, I got to believe she's a legitimate instrument of death.
It did bring some questions up about her, though, in the sense that you see Littlefinger watching her, and I was surprised that Arya would be that of much of an exhibitionist with her abilities. It seems like it'd be in her best interest to hide those sort of things. But I think that Arya she's developed a certain cunning now, and it remains to be seen if she is actually going to outthink Littlefinger, in the sense that he's watching her, and I think you can think one of two things. Either he's looking at her and he's saying, okay, this is a weapon that I can learn to control, that I can manipulate her to a weapon that I can use as a tool. Or he's looking at her saying it's a reflection of Kat. He's seeing some part of Kat that's left in her daughter, and so proud that she became something, this lethal little package. But on the other hand, I'm led to believe that Arya is playing him, that display was not for her training. She wanted him to see her, and there's a reason behind it. She seems to know something about him that others don't, or he's on her list.
Yeah, I agree with you. And that display, that was impressive. Getting by the guards, and her matrix dodging was cool, but the way she uses Needle, that tiny sword, against a larger opponent in Brienne and her sword, and the little dagger flip she does, amazing. It reminded me of Syrio Forel, the water dance, the fighting style that he was teaching her in King's Landing when she was first learning to fight. I think that's the biggest influence in her style. And I believe now that she's a physical threat against anyone. And Littlefinger realizes that. If she was trying to send a message, Littlefinger got that message loud and clear.
If you didn't catch the dagger flip, it's probably because you watched the pirated version. It was marked up by the timestamp there, but there was a really cool dagger flip in the episode. Go back and watch it on HBO, for God's sake.
Another couple things here that I think I really liked and took away from it was Jon. I'd been mentioning for a couple episodes now that how does Jon prove to people that the threat is real? And we got the answer in this episode. Jon walks down. He wants to show Dany in the caves before they start hacking away at it. And they come across the engravings of the First Men and the Children of the Forest and their partnership against the White Walkers. And Dany, she has something physical. He has the proof, and she's now willing to fight for Jon in the North. But he's got to bend a knee. Do you think Jon's going to bend a knee, or is it just going to become inevitable that Dany has to join with Jon and fight this threat?
There's precedent. If you go back in history, right, there's precedent for these sorts of scenarios. When you have two powers and one needs to yield to the other, but you need a political solution so that you don't lose face. That's where marriage between royals came from. And the sense here is you've got a king in the north, you've got a queen in the south, and if you want them to work together, there's a very politically expedient solution, and that is the two marry. Therefore, you have the kingdoms joined, and he is both bending the knee and also taking a seat beside her on the throne. I think that was the setup there. Again, I agree with you. I love that cave scene, the way it was set up. Another part that I really liked about it is that, they get, like I mentioned, that girl talk moment that I wasn't crazy about. It leads directly into an incredible display of trust between Daenerys and Jon, where she trusts him enough to follow him into a cave, no guards, and she lets him touch her in the cave. And I thought that was a remarkable moment. It was a landmark moment in the series.
Yeah, I think an equally important component to that relationship is Jon has taken Tyrion's advice and gone around and asked members of her inner council and her soldiers and the people around, what do they think of her and why do they follow her? And it has to make a big impression on him that Missandei follows because she believes in her, that if she wants to leave today, Daenerys would give her a ship and go. She follows because she's going to change the system and not because of her name or she was the daughter of some king. So Jon has started to buy into the fact that she may be different, and I think he could possibly bend a knee in believing she is a better leader for everyone and not just, the South, that she could be something different.
I do want to give props to Emilia Clarke and Kit Harington on this episode. If you look at how many words Jon spoke in this episode versus how much he conveyed a lot. We talk about sort of the efficiency of each scene. First of all, when Theon showed up, I thought he was going to get a beat down right there on the beach. And I was like, God, we're going to see Theon get his ass kicked again. But Jon, in the way that he interacts with him, you can see on his face. And when he says the queen is gone, there's a pride on his face. He's feeling that bond with Daenerys. And again, Emilia Clarke, in the scenes where she goes into battle, again, she's taken some criticism, and I've criticized her in the past too. But I feel like she was very believable in this in all the scenes. And again, she's interacting with CGI, so kudos to her.
Yeah, another big takeaway for me is, even though we see, we thought the big takeaway from High Garden was going to be the gold to pay off the Iron Bank. Equally important is the Lannisters are focusing on stripping the crops. That's got to be a bigger impact for the war to come. Winter is coming. If you've now sacked the largest producer of food in Westeros, it's going to have a big impact down the road. So now the gold, thankfully, makes it into King's Landing, but all of that wheat has now been destroyed. I got to believe that that's going to play big in the episodes that we have left. You're fighting an undead army. You can't do it on an empty stomach.
One other thing I want to touch on when we're talking about things that we learn in this episode, following along the theory, again, that's been much debated, that Varys is a traitor in Daenerys' camp, and Tyrion's many mistakes will cause him to lose his position at her favor. I think here we were on the verge of that. Daenerys pointed out that Tyrion is a Lannister, that maybe he favors his family, that the setbacks that they've been dealt, she kind of blames him for them. And I think that Jon really saved him from falling out of her favor. And I think, in a sense, that Jon saved Daenerys, because if she were to fall squarely on Varys' advice, if he is in fact the traitor, that could have been her downfall. So it is. I like that the writers are taking us right to the brink of disaster and then pulling us back each time. It's like an emotional bungee jump. I love it.
No, I don't know if she's at least pulled it back for Tyrion. She says enough with clever plans. I took it as, Dany was signaling a clear change to the dragon, that his role as the key strategist and counsel is diminished. She said no more clever plans, and then she immediately asked Jon, what would you do? That's a field demotion in my eyes. And I think it signals that she really has lost trust in her current counsel.
I agree. However, she is a metered response in the sense that Jon basically, he did not have to say what he did. And I think that he, in a sense, he was giving wise counsel, but at the same time, he was also aiding Tyrion in not having his voice completely left out.
Yeah, one last thing I got of something I learned. I never knew that men shit themselves when they die. Did you know that? Is that true?
Well, yeah, think about it. You don't typically push your shit out. You hold it in, right? And so I think that's absolutely true that you shit yourself when you die.
I like that Dickens most. He was upset about the smell. And at least you saw that in that moment when Jaime's asking what battle was like for him, there is regret of going back on their oath, and that he was killing men that he knew. So it was nice to see, even in the end, he hadn't completely gone against his true character, and there was a question of whether what he had done was right.
We talked a lot about what we learned from this episode, but a lot of questions came out too, and I think that's the interchange that always comes with Game of Thrones. You get some answers, and you get new questions that convey into the next episode.
For me, a big one I want to see here is the relationship between Bronn and Jaime. They've always been close. Since Jaime lost his hand and lost his confidence, and Bronn kind of nursed him back to fighting health and restored somewhat of that luster that the Kingslayer had before. But now, whether it was Lady Olenna's reveal, that there seems to be now a real divide, that Bronn is no longer a trusted friend and ally. He's a paid employee. And I don't know. We see at the end there, of course, that Bronn saves him. I don't know how that's going to play out going forward, but it seemed to be a shift in their relationship.
Yeah, I wonder if we spoke in the last week about how Jaime is a broken man and that people are seeing him. They see him emasculated by Euron, by Cersei, Lady Olenna. She takes a stab at him too. And I wonder if it is a signal of his diminishing ferocity or the fact that people aren't necessarily that impressed with him anymore, that Bronn is willing to push him. But at the same time, I think that we see very clearly as he rescues him in the end, that there is still a fondness, or there's a bond there that goes beyond money.
One of the other things I have a question of, and this will lead us into our last topic, is can you swim in armor and chainmail?
I think that was the question that we're left with. It's the cliffhanger for this episode. Is this going to be a drowning situation? I don't think that they would save him just to throw him in the water and have him drown. And we'll get into the battle here in a moment. I did not like the fact that both Bronn and Jaime were able to survive this. And I know it's not about what I like, but it's just about the fact that the setup was there. We've said before that the show may shy away from killing off important characters. And again, now we're 4 episodes deep and we've got Olenna dead. But Jaime here, by all means, when Tyrion's saying, flee, and Jaime is just a fucking moron and goes right at the mother dragons while a dragon is right with her. And again, I understand that he's blinded by his love for Cersei or his desire to end this thing quickly for her. I get it. This is Olenna's prophecy, but my God, there was just too much. There were like 3 or 4 situations within 2 minutes of people just narrowly escaping death at the hands of a dragon. It was a bit much.
No, as a soldier, I admire his attempt there at the end. The likelihood of him surviving wasn't great. But you have Daenerys in an open field, unprotected. Granted, you have a large injured dragon. That shot you have to take, so I respect him. But on a whole, I want to ask you, thoughts on the battle? How does it rank up there with other battles we've seen on Game of Thrones? What are your big takeaways?
I mean, again, I said that the battle scene alone is argument against piracy. I also think that it's not quite Battle of the Bastards. It was good, but it wasn't great. I would say it's great, but it wasn't superior. Let's say that. I did love the moments of Tyrion overlooking and doing his commentary there. The big thing for me, though, was looking at this as it was so representative of what's going on in the show overall. That this is more than a battle between 2 armies. It's a clash of cultures. Just like they've never seen dragons, the Lannister army has also never seen Dothraki. And the Dothraki have never encountered Lannister army. And so as they were charging down, I'm thinking, whose fighting styles are going to prevail? Is it that agility and skill on horseback, or is it armor and discipline? They've never seen each other, and we found out very quickly how it went down.
Yeah, I'm not embarrassed to say, as you start hearing the rumbling and the Dothraki blood riders screaming, I got goosebumps. I'm not embarrassed to say that the show can still hit me that way. But I love the agility without the armor, the technique of the Dothraki almost surfing on top of the horses. And one of the Dothraki says to Tyrion, when he looks as they're getting slaughtered in the open field, your people can't fight. And it's an accurate description of this bloodbath. But I never knew that the dragon fire was so much like napalm. It is effective at breaking lines. It reduces men to ash in moments. This would have had to have been a terrifying moment for anyone on that battlefield. And I don't know how the Lannister army regroups after this.
Yeah, I expected. I mean, you just did see a lot of people fleeing, their armor again working against them as it heats up and they can't pull it off their bodies and they're kind of burning up before your eyes. But I think one point where the two of us really conflicted on this is the reveal of Scorpion, right? I hated this plot device. I thought it was terrible, improbable. I was pissed at Daenerys for not just flying away after the first bolt flew by. You liked it though.
No, I thought it was tense. I honestly believed that Drogon was dead. When you see him, granted, it was cheesy, the reveal when he shoots the Dothraki blood rider through the chest, and he sticks to the other wagon. But when it opens up and there's flames and the fighting is going on all around, and he's frantically trying to find and orient the weapon to try to find Daenerys, I felt it was tense. My heart was going. I thought he was dead. So it worked for me.
I try to put myself in the position of, anti-aircraft guns. They don't fire bolts, right? They fire flak. They fire big bursts of metal. It is very hard to hit any flying thing, no matter, even if it's the size of a bus, coming in at high velocity with a manually operated and a single man operating it. Crossbow seems a little silly, but again, it's not my job to judge the writing here. That's not what I'm here to do. But as far as the style of it goes, everything in this episode felt a little too high tech, from Bran's wheelchair to this, like, I call it the transformer deployment of the, it looked like a Patriot missile battery. It was ridiculous.
No, but I blame it not on the writing. I blame it on Daenerys. Why is she coming in so low? Drogon's flying over that body of water, and you can see the wind making the ripples in the water. Come in much higher. So yes, you're not going to hit Drogon if he's flying at a nice high altitude, but when he's coming in low and straight like that, that's an amateur move by Daenerys. Another amateur move by, you see the first bolt come by, you get the hell out of there. But you're obviously going to need to get Daenerys some kind of armor, because she's going to get hit by an archer. All you need is one to get her in the neck, and the entire war is over. But as a soldier, I love the fact that we mentioned previously how technology will trump previous strategies and military techniques. The dragons have, for all intents and purposes, rendered the archers ineffective. There's no longer a safe distance that you can just sit back and shoot over the front lines. This has to give a big advantage to Daenerys and her non-traditional force in fighting.
Yeah, so overall, this episode, I think, as you mentioned, Big D, at the top of the recording, it gave people a lot of what they were looking for here. If you're a fan of emotional scenes, you got that. Intrigue, you got that. Action, plenty of that. And I think that we're really looking at, if we keep this breakneck pace for another 3 episodes this season, you're going to have really an episode or a season to remember, potentially the best season of the show, which is great to see this late in a series. I mean, again, remember, most shows by season 7, they're running out of gas. Season 5 is usually where you should just stop. So again, with the slight criticism, and it's not even really criticism, but the questions that we have about this episode, I think that the Game of Thrones has done a marvelous job of keeping us engaged and having plot lines that, for the most part, make a lot of sense.
Yeah, I'm excited. Probably as soon as I post this, I'm going to turn around and go watch this thing again.
So after you watch and listen to the podcast, please write into us at host@shadowtv.com. Let us know what you thought of the episode. And if you get it in quickly, you can get it in ahead of the deep dive so we can kind of incorporate your thoughts into it. If you don't make it by the deep dive and you hear the deep dive has some thoughts, again, write into us and we'll get into it on the Small Council, which is our listener mail episode coming on Thursday. That concludes this week's episode of Shadow on TV, Game of Thrones edition. Be sure to follow us on social media and share with a friend. We're on Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram at Shadow on TV. On Facebook, search for Shadow on TV Podcast. The website is shadowontv.com, where you can see other people's emails as well. We updated a ton of them this week. We're everywhere fine podcasts can be found, including iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe. And if you stop by iTunes, please be sure to leave a review. That helps the podcast grow. On behalf of my co-hosts, Big D, Dick Ebert, and Roger Roper, I'm Gene Lyons. Be sure to join us on Tuesday for the Game of Thrones deep dive for Episode 4, The Spoils of War. Thanks for listening, and as always, remember to knock twice before joining us on the throne.